All right. So we got the gang back together. Let's talk off the plan. Massive scam or magic bullet. So if you're a first home buyer, you're probably hearing a lot about off the plan, especially when it comes to first homeowner grants and government rebates. There's some controversial opinions around whether the off the plan is good, whether it's bad. But I think before we jump into it, Pete, can you give us a breakdown of what exactly is off the plan?
So off the plans are those apartments or units that you think about that are either high rise, so in the CBDs, or they're located just outside of CBDs. So your inner suburbs, like in Adelaide, you've got Prospect and Bowden, where there's a lot of apartments and townhouses going up. So you're basically buying into the development before it's been built. It's high density. It's a fixed price contract as well. And the risk is there's no real guarantee that it's going to be worth what it is today in the future, because there's a bit of an oversupply happening in certain areas. But also you have no control over the design of the apartment or townhouse as well.
Yeah. So essentially you point at it and you get given a thing exactly the way that the specs are. You don't really get any input and it doesn't even exist to start with.
Yeah. Whatever the shiny brochure says is exactly what you're going to get.
But who knows when you'll get it?
Yeah, that's it. And that's the risk, right? You're buying something that hasn't been built yet at a price point as well that there is an element of risk because it hasn't been built and there's often a lot going up at the same time.
I know it's like probably difficult for most people to understand now, but Pete, you might be with me on this, that previously I know of people who bought off the plan, and I want to say 10, 15 years ago, and they overpaid for off the plan because they believed the prices would go up, and then they were left holding an asset that wasn't worth what they paid for it. I know that's probably not relevant now, but is that still a real risk?
Yeah, I think so, particularly in the CBDs. When you're buying the apartments in the high rises, there is just that no guarantee really at the end of the day that it's going to be worth it. So I think there's a real risk. If you really wanted to mitigate the risk, you could be looking at the smaller complexes and trying to make sure there's something different about them, maybe bigger bedrooms or something like that. Yeah, it's not the cookie cutter apartments going up. There's just some element of difference would probably be the best way to protect yourself, and not buying in the CBD as well is a big one.
Well, my first understanding of off the plan way back when was probably Port Adelaide, everything that happened there and the oversupply.
Yeah, and it's still catching up.
Yeah. I'm talking a solid 15, 20 years ago.
Yep. And Brisbane was similar as well, and Melbourne's still paying the price for that too. So it takes a long time for the market to actually catch up, if it ever does.
I mean, we've heard a lot of negatives about the plan straight into explaining it. From both of your perspectives, is there positives involved? We can dive into horror stories a little bit, but for the first home buyer that might be listening to this and we've just completely crapped on them buying an off the plan apartment, what do you guys see as the upside for them in terms of a reason why they might go off the plan?
Well,
Story.
go for it.
One of my clients recently, not a first home buyer, but a second investment that he had purchased, bought into a development that the builder just constantly was late. And while he was very frustrated that he couldn't get his product onto the market, it ended up working out in his favor, and he had significant capital growth in that time because of what the overall market was doing. So it worked out well for him because it was worth more by the time he finally got the finished product.
I feel like that's almost the exception and not the rule, though. When you look at it from a lending grant perspective, especially in Adelaide, for example, you can only get the stamp duty waiver for first home buyers on new stock, whereas in other states, you can get it for existing. So it drives a lot of people towards buying off the plan or house and land. Probably a good time to split the difference between the two, because the terms get used interchangeably very often in terms of off the plan and house and land. They are a little bit different in the sense that off the plan is literally that. You're looking at a planning document. It's a vacant piece of sky that hasn't been built into anything at the moment, and you're committing to a drawing, essentially. Whereas when you're looking at house and land, you are buying the land. The land may not be titled yet and ready to build on, but you're buying it with the anticipation of that happening. And then you also get an element of control over the building drawings. For example, you can engage another builder to build it out. You can change specs. And so those are kind of the core differences in terms of off the plan and house and land, both of which tie into a lot of first home buyer benefit schemes. In SA, you can get the $15,000 first homeowners grant for off the plan and house and land. Essentially, the government writes you a check for $15K because you're buying something new. And then you've got the stamp duty waiver, which can save people 40, 50K, which is incredible. When you look at someone wanting to buy an existing property and going in with a 5% deposit, let's say they're looking at something that's 700,000, you got a 5% deposit at 35 grand, and then you've got stamp duty at, let's say, 35, 40. They're looking at 70, 75 grand to even stand a chance. Whereas if you look at getting into off the plan or house and land, they need to have a 5% deposit, so 35 grand in cash, but then they don't pay any stamp duty, so 40, 45 grand saving. And then on top of that, they get the first home owners grant back to them as well, which essentially gets taken off their deposit, and it makes a really big difference. That's one of the big appeals for off the plan, in particular for first home buyers. It is an affordable way for them to get into the market and get into something brand new as well, which generally comes with lower maintenance and things like that. Those are what I see as the pros. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, look, I tend to agree. It's good for first home buyers because it's easier access to a home. But if you're going to go in there and buy it as your first home with the idea that it's going to significantly grow in value, as some of them have over the last 5-6 years, and it's probably not going to happen unless you're getting in early enough. So I think in Sky's example, and I know of someone as well who bought into a development early enough and actually rode quite a bit of growth in that purchase. But if you're buying with the intention of it being an investment and you're buying at the back end or something of the development, so it might be like stage 3 or stage 4, the growth probably won't be there from an investment side of things. But if you're getting in early enough and it's getting you access as a first home buyer, I do think, yeah, there's definitely some benefit to it.
That's probably a really good tip just there. If you're stage 1, yep, my client was stage 1. And stage 3 is underway at the moment. And I agree. I don't think they will have anywhere near as much growth because of the supply issue.
So for people who aren't well versed in property speak, can one of you explain to me what stage 1, 2, 5, 10 actually means?
Hopefully there's not 10. Would have touched it if there was.
Who wants to lay it out in terms of what actually is a stage 1? What is a stage 2? How does that actually work?
I don't know if I could even explain it properly, but development, generally, there's multiple stages. They're trying to create little communities. We saw it out north many times over and over that Hickenbotham started that. Seen it at Bowden, Prospect, as you mentioned. Now Tonsley's the latest little community within a community. But I think, yeah, they're the ones at stage 3. So it's sort of past in that sense if you're looking to buy for capital growth reasons. It's really only going to be left for your own occupiers now.
Mm-hmm. Pete, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good summary. You just think about it as the big block of vacant land, and I guess it's all subdivided, so to speak, into the different stages, and they build out as they go. And what I notice is the stage 1 and 2 developments are often a little bit bigger because they want to entice people. They want to get people in, right? So they need to build the community up quickly.
Better. Yeah.
So stage 1 and 2 are often superior apartments, so to speak, or townhouses. And then when you get to 3 and 4, they're often smaller and not as good because they've built out the community, so to speak. And people
they've already
are like,
made their money.
Yeah.
Cream for them at the top.
They're just building it out. Yeah.
A good add-on to that is the way development financing works. I won't dive into it in too much depth, but pre-sales, so selling a portion of the proposed development, is generally a finance term for developers to get additional funding from the banks. And so when you look at, for example, stage 1 in a development, whether it be or first release of a apartment building, house and land, townhouse, any development that has any sort of size, pre-sales is actually something that they really need to hit to ensure their funding keeps on going so they can actually finish that development. What that means is that, yes, there's an element of risk into going into a new development, but from my experience, the people who have gotten in at stage 1 generally fare pretty well because they get really good value for money because it's in the developer's best interest to actually have pre-sales there. And that's how they meet their pre-sale quota so they can get funding for the rest of the project from the lenders that are out there. So I think when it comes down to looking in, whether it be off the plan or a house and land situation, if the area stacks up well, which I think, Pete, you'll be able to dive into in a little bit, if the area stacks up well, you're almost better being first one in than last one in from a value perspective, but that also comes with inherent risk as well. So if someone was looking at trying to avoid Sky, Pete, you've talked about capital growth not being a thing in a lot of these developments and people actually going backwards. If you were chatting to a first home buyer about how to avoid being stung by off the plan when picking something, what would be some points that you would give them to help them through that?
So if we're looking in the city, there's obviously quite a few high-rise off-the-plan developments going up across Australia. You'd be just looking for something that is different. So just looking for that factor that's going to get future people who are going to buy the property after you to think, yeah, wow, it's got bigger bedrooms. There's only so much that you can actually have that is different, or maybe it's lower density or something like that in the CBD. If you're looking in the suburbs, it's getting in early and trying to make sure you're getting in areas that are landlocked. So there's not going to be an abundance of new apartments being built over the next 20 years. It might just be one development, 4 or 5 stages over the next 5 years. And if you can get in early, you'll ride that wave of growth, which we've talked about. But also it makes sense because as more stages are being built out, it's becoming more and more appealing to buy into that particular development. So it's higher risk to buy at the early stages, but also higher reward if you're buying in appealing suburbs, which are somewhat landlocked, which aren't going to see that massive supply in the future of apartments and townhouses.
So avoid being landlocked.
That if you're buying it for an investment, you don't want to be in an area that while people need to rent, like you don't want that supply issue because you're going to have the same in trying to get a return.
Yeah, I think even the idea of going off the plan for an investment property to me is something that doesn't sit well very often.
People do it.
It's very rare that it goes well. And for it to go well, you need to either be a massive data head who understands everything back to front, or you need to be working with a professional, because part of these sales pitches for off the plan, etc., are you'll see massive capital growth because the value of the entire area will go up while we're under construction and we're priced it on today's values and all of those sorts of things. And there's times where you can make a really big win. For example, a small townhouse release was something that I'm always a big fan of. If it's in the right area, has the right amenities and infrastructure around it, okay, cool, I can get around that. But if it's a 20, 25 story tower, you're just like, okay, you're one of 400 or you're one of 1,000. Was your property unique at all? You're not really going to get a return.
No. And that's been my experience and why when I speak to investors and they say, oh, but there's a rental guarantee. Yeah, but what does that actually look like? I know of one particular building in the city that they were promised a rental guarantee, but what they didn't read in the fine print was that you only get the rent after all the costs have come out. And they were paying for staff to run the building. They were paying for all these other miscellaneous costs that the return by the end of the month was laughably small. We're talking $400 a month. They were locked into this scheme too, so they couldn't get out of it, couldn't rent it to anyone else. It was just a case of reading the small print that nobody did or understood what they were buying.
I think it even just comes down to take the contract to a property lawyer. Don't sign it based off someone who's just put it in front of you and explained it to you.
Exactly, the salesperson.
Because the salesperson wants to sell.
Yeah.
And that's their job, which is fair enough. And as a consumer, your job is to make sure that you're protected, which is getting a conveyancer or a property lawyer to review the contract to make sure that there isn't any clauses that you can get stung by.
Yeah, like being committed to a 10-year pooled rent scheme that you can't get out of. And then post 10 years, everyone's trying to sell at the same time. So it's not worth anything.
Talk to me more about the 10-year pooled rent thing.
So that was how they did the rental guarantee. The premise was okay, the building's got all of this rent coming in. We're going to pull the rent, so your risks are lower, theoretically. Even if your property sits empty, well, other properties are getting rented. That was the idea that was sold to the investors of your rent is pulled, so no matter what happens, you're always getting money. But then they didn't see that, okay, all the costs need to come out, kind of like a strata, I guess, but a pooled rent scheme. That's why it was $100 a month. And I think the buy-in prices for some of them were, and this is a little while ago, but I think they're still selling for that, to be honest. But I think the buy-in prices were $180, $200 up to $250, and you're getting a return of $400 a month. Those numbers don't add up. But what they were sold was $1,600 a month, but not all the costs coming out.
$1,600 a month, but then once everyone actually eats their share, you're left with nothing.
Yeah. And the developer who did it, he retained probably 60% of the stock, and the whole scheme was really aimed to be in his benefit.
Yeah, cool. What do you mean the developer isn't a...
He was a hotel developer that turned to resi, and it, was cooked.
Look, developers acting in their own interests is probably a good segue into something we were chatting about the other day, where I'm obviously in the mortgage broking and finance space. Pete, you're in the buyer's agent space. Sky, you're in property management and do a little bit of sales. And we've all been separately approached by developers to, let's say, expertly recommend their stock to our clients. And I think some of these numbers would blow people's minds in terms of what gets thrown at us every day.
I was offended because you got offered how much?
I got offered 50 grand.
And I only got offered 44. So I was like, what's this pink tax? Why am I not getting as much commission?
Honestly, they were like, oh, Sky will take less. She's happy. She's not sus. But now they know that we've talked to each other, you can go back and push back. But it's absurd. It'll be a brand new development and you'll have a so-called investment expert or development salesperson reach out to you and essentially be like, oh, if you recommend that your client buys as part of our release and takes on this spec of build, we'll give you 50 grand.
It's pretty creative when you think about it, because we're pretty much saying, don't trust the developer, trust the team of experts.
Yep.
So can we just caveat and say we're actually not recommending?
If we are recommending stuff, it's not because we're getting paid 50 grand under the table.
Yeah. Can people find out? Can they ask trusted expert? Are you getting a kickback from this?
Of course they can. I legally have to disclose anything in writing to a client if I'm going to financially benefit from anything. So if I give them a loan recommendation, it'll have outlined that this person might be entitled to some sort of referral fee or something like that. And it's important to understand that when people see that, they immediately might think kickback. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just built into someone's business model that instead of marketing costs, they might pay a referral fee. So instead of paying for Google ads, instead of paying for Facebook ads, they might offer a referral fee to a business that's in a similar vertical for a referral to their clients. And then it comes down to that business owner to vet them and make sure they're a good operator. And people might not be happy with me sharing this and breaking it down because it's sort of something that gets talked about under the surface. But referral commissions and stuff like that are very common in our industry across all of our verticals. And I think it just comes down to if the person that you're working with happily discloses it to you, that immediately gets rid of a lot of red flags in my eyes, because most consumers now are very switched on. They understand that businesses have marketing costs. It's not all just word of mouth and all of those sorts of things. And so if you're able to explain it and position it to the client and still let them know that you trust the person that you're referring them to, I haven't had a client who's had a problem with it. I think it's when you start hiding things, you don't disclose things, and everything gets done in the shadows that you're wondering, is my mortgage broker getting paid 50 grand to refer me to a developer?
But if someone's disclosing that, if you disclose that to a client, most clients would surely have their flags up.
Yeah. By the way, look, buy this development, just so you know, I'm getting paid 50 grand for this. They know they're paying for it.
Yeah, of course.
So even though you're disclosing, or we all disclose whatever the referral fees are, there's a lot of people out there that
Who wouldn't?
it's in the fine print, I guess, possibly.
Mm.
But most people would not fall for that. They'd be like, why are you getting 50 grand for me to buy this? Who's paying for that?
That's where it comes down to the ethics of the person, right? Because all of us get offers like that every day and we just laugh at them because we're just like, nah, mate, I know my client's paying for that 50 grand.
Mhm.
Like, I know that it's not coming out of the developer's good graces. The price of their property's been loaded.
Negative equity from day one, almost.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're
Mhm.
doing to your client. I mean, there's
Yeah.
even some buyer's agents that will charge their fee on top as well. So they'll get the 50 grand cut plus the 10 to 15 or even 20 grand buyer's agent fee on top.
Yeah. Well, that's what sort of started this whole conversation
Mm.
because someone had asked the question and the thought of buying an investment and you're, say, 50, 60 grand in the hole before you even start.
From day one, before your
Yeah.
settlement, it's
It's not pretty, is it?
So we're probably just like, don't buy off the plan.
Look, it's probably a good segue into how to bring us home strong. How can someone do off the plan the right way from both of your perspectives?
well, it's
Be
getting
early.
in early. Getting into the development early would be the big one.
Mm.
Making sure you're good access to amenities and all that stuff that people want these days.
Mm.
And it's somewhat landlocked as well. So there's no influx of future supply coming onto the
Yeah.
market.
That was going to be my suggestion, understanding the numbers, how many are going to be released at this point, what does that supply demand issue look like at that time, and then for the future, not even just 3 to 5 years down the line, but how many stages are there? How much supply issue is going to be in this development for the long term? Because property is a long-term game. You want to see that it goes up in the 10, 20 years that you own it. And so if you've got more stages being released over the coming 10 years, well, you're not going to see a whole lot of activity.
Yeah. And if you're going into it from an investment point of view, even if you're thinking of living in, if you think, I'm going to be smart and buy the property, live in it for 2 years, take advantage of all the grants and then use it as an investment or sell it to make money, I'd probably think twice about that because it's probably not going to eventuate the way you think it's going to. And it's probably best, in my opinion, to try and save more rather than buy into an apartment complex which has already nearly been finished with the intention of selling it in a year or two or moving out and converting it to an investment property because it probably won't pan out the way you want it to.
I have that exact conversation with clients every single day.
Yeah. Can I just segue on that let's say it's the first home buyers because you started this saying this is a really appealing way for them to get into the market. Because they're in their heads, correct me if I'm wrong, they're going, okay, I'll buy this now. And as my income increases or as the market increases, then I can sell it and upgrade or keep it, rent it, whatever that may be. Is that not a problem in itself as a strategy?
Yeah. Strategically, it's a problem because you're putting money straight into an asset that isn't going to perform as well. And I think when it comes down to the first home buyers who probably listening to this and being like, well, fuck, it's all doom and gloom. I should never look it off the plan ever. I would say a house is a home before it's an asset. And if you are looking for somewhere to put down roots, you know that you're going to be there for a decent amount of time, 5-10 years at least, and it serves the purpose of what you need it to, by all means, go for it. Forget about what the return might look like. Because if you're going to be living there forever or 10 years or whatever it is, you're not really worried about the return on investment per se. You're worried about having a stable roof over your head. When you think about a young family or a single parent or something like that, where they just need that stability of having a roof over their head and no housing uncertainty, you might listen to this and be like, oh, off the plan sounds horrible because of all the drawbacks that we've talked about. But when you look at it in terms of what you actually want from it, which is stable roof over your head, an affordable way into the market, manageable home loan repayments, good infrastructure and access to things around you, then all of that, in my opinion, outweighs what the future growth may or may not be. I think sometimes we can fall into a trap of assetifying real estate and only looking at through and the three of us probably do it because we've all invested ourselves and we're passionate about it as a wealth vehicle as well, but losing sight of it being a home and what that can really mean to people. And having that accessible way into the market isn't a bad thing. And I think about, for example, some of these developments are super accessible and so convenient. There's one that I can think of in particular that it's mixed commercial and residential. So you've got the apartments on top. They've got a shared courtyard, backyard thing outside for dogs, the kids, barbecues, all of that sort of stuff. They've got a rooftop garden for when you want to entertain upstairs. And downstairs, they've got a Woolies, a Coles, a whole bunch of restaurants, a whole retail precinct, and they've got a train station that's a 3-minute walk. When you look at that from a livability perspective, how convenient is all of that? Why would I worry about it underperforming, let's say, a few percentage points if I know that I can, because of how accessible and how good everything is amenity-wise, I know that I could live there for probably the next 10, 15 years, and I could get into it for half the cost up front compared to an existing property and all the headaches that come with an older property.
Yeah. Is it not perhaps in that scenario, looking at it, like you say, a roof over your head, which I think we all do forget that these assets are still providing a safe place to sleep and live, but like a forced saving plan. So from a strategic perspective for the first home buyer, is it not the best thing they can do is to just smash their mortgage as much as they can because the growth potentially won't be there, but the ability to move or upgrade will depend on their equity position?
100%. Pay down the debt, utilize the equity, and then go into an asset that might serve you better.
Like if you need more space.
Definitely. To bring us home, off the plan, risky would be the word. But you can mitigate those risks. If you're not confident, it could be that you engage with a buyer's agent to help you pick the right release to look at. When you're looking at contracts, making sure that you've got a conveyancer or a property lawyer reviewing them before you sign off on the dotted line, and really looking at them through the lens of a home. If you can see them being a home, then by all means, act early, get into those early stages like we chatted about. But if you're looking at it as I'm going to be clever and take advantage of the schemes and then flip it to an investment, then you're probably barking up the wrong tree. Would there be anything you guys add before we wrap up?
It's pretty spot on.
No, I think it's just think about the mindset that you have before you enter into these contracts, I guess. If you want that long-term home, makes sense. But if you really think you're going to convert it to an investment property and it's a way into the market, then it's probably something you want to think twice about.
Awesome way to wrap us up, Pete. As always, guys, lovely catching up, and I'll speak with you all next week.